Today, we are opening up a really surprising file. The intersection of human psychology, nervous system regulation, and the power of narrative, all revealed through the 2003 film Uptown Girls.
hmm
We're going to go far beyond, the surface level friendship story to really examine the profound defense mechanisms at play.
Yeah, it's so much deeper than people remember.
This specific deep dive into human patterns revealed through storytelling focuses really intensely on the strategies two central characters develop to survive catastrophic loss.
And not just the strategies, but how they eventually mirrored each other back toward healing. It's quite a journey.
It really is. And the entire analysis for today is drawn exclusively from the written analysis, Guarding the Heart Through Anger, what Uptown Girls teaches us about survival, loss, and freedom.
Right, which was created by Helen Mudiba, the creator of The Pathway to Sovereignty.
Now, for those who might be unfamiliar with Helen Mudiba's framework, the pathway to sovereignty is, well, it's essentially a map for self-regulation.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It helps us discern, in any given moment, whether our nervous system is reacting from a place of sheer survival driven by fear and historical pain, or if we're responding from a state of self-regulated presence.
And the core mission, as Mudiba outlines it, is to return us to the inherent safety of our own bodies.
Which is really the only prerequisite for building functional, complex, and intimate relationships.
Exactly. Without that, you're just two survival strategies interacting.
As always, a quick but important note. This deep dive contains heavy spoilers for Uptown Girls. So if you haven't seen the film, you might want to pause here because we're getting right into the pivotal emotional climax.
We really are. You've been warned.
The screen tells their story, but the echo is ours. Attachment styles in the movies, with selfie seeker deep dive, because through their stories you can uncover your own inner patterns.
Okay, so let's look at the core theme we're unpacking today. This analysis posits that the film is really a masterclass in demonstrating how anger functions as this intricate, necessary protection against unbearable grief.
I love that phrasing. Necessary protection.
It shows how absolute control is a mask for deep-seated fear, and I think this is the most important part, how the painful wounds we see in other people are often precise mirrors of what we've exiled or locked away in ourselves.
That mirroring idea is so central. And the entire thesis really is encapsulated in a line spoken by the 8-year-old character, Ray.
Oh, it's such a powerful line.
Helen Mudiba highlights it right at the beginning of her analysis. Ray asks this question that, honestly, so many adults live by unconsciously. Have you ever stayed mad because it felt safer than missing someone?
Just chills from an 8-year-old.
That single line, delivered with a child's just cutting clarity, reveals anger not as an outburst, but as calculated emotional armor. Survival strategy. Creating distance automatically equates to protection. We believe, often without even realizing it, that staying closed off is fundamentally safer than allowing ourselves to feel the profound ache of longing or loss.
So the psychological hook of the film that isn't just about watching two people clash.
No, not at all. It's about witnessing what happens when two people who are both heavily armored collide. I mean, if our strategy is to distance ourselves because proximity feels dangerous, what happens when the coldness or the evasion or the distance coming from the person in front of us is also just their self-protection?
Right. What happens when both people think being alone is the safest option?
Exactly. How does any real connection ever begin? Their meeting becomes an existential threat to both of their internal fortresses.
That sets the stage perfectly for part one, reframing attachment and loss. This is really the foundational tragedy that defines these two characters.
It is.
We have our two central figures, Molly Gunn and Ray Schlein, and the analysis makes it starkly clear that they are united by experiencing catastrophic loss at the exact same psychologically formative age, 8 years old.
The same age, but completely different responses.
Completely. And these responses create two different but equally rigid defense structures.
Yeah.
So let's start with Ray Schlein. At age 8, her life is just shattered by massive unpredictability. Her father suffers a severe stroke, which leads to his incapacitation and effectively removes him from her life as a functional parent. At the same time, her mother becomes emotionally absent.
And the analysis points to a really specific moment, doesn't it? The ballet recital.
Yes. The mother misses Ray's ballet recital, which was the one performance Ray had meticulously practiced for months. And it wasn't malice, it was just total emotional unavailability due to overwhelming stress.
Reliability just vanished for Ray. The analysis notes that her child nervous system registered this as an environment that was deeply, fundamentally unreliable.
So her survival system responded.
It had to. It responded by attempting to create total certainty where none existed in her human relationships. So Ray's specific fortress was built on intense control, rigid routines, absolute order, and that cold, highly controlled anger. She created a world where at least the environment obeyed the rules, even if the adults in her life did not.
And then there's Molly Gunn. Chronologically, she's an adult, living this life of chaotic whimsy on inherited wealth, but the analysis argues so convincingly that she is emotionally frozen at 8 years old.
Right, the precise moment her parents died suddenly. The loss was sudden, no warning, no chance for a goodbye.
So when a loss is that sudden, that catastrophic, and it happens before a child's capacity to process complex grief is even developed?
The nervous system often just executes a freeze response. Molly went to bed confused and woke up to absence. The magnitude of that unprocessed loss was just too overwhelming to feel. So Molly's coping mechanism became flight specifically, flight into fantasy.
She relies on charm, deflection.
Creating a life characterized by absolute avoidance of anything grounded in reality, especially responsibility and, most of all, grief.
So their meeting is this inevitable collision, because they represent the exact inverse of each other's avoidance strategies. Ray's contraction and control versus Molly's expansion and chaos.
Neither can initially tolerate what the other embodies. Ray sees Molly as a threat to her order. Molly sees Ray as a threat to her denial.
And the analysis asserts that this immediate, intense conflict is the precise forcing mechanism required to compel a shift out of their long-held stability-seeking patterns.
That brings us directly to the pathway to sovereignty framework,
Yeah.
which is really the psychological blueprint for understanding their movement. The analysis emphasizes that we have to stop viewing attachment styles as fixed identities.
Right. You aren't an avoidant.
Exactly. They are intelligent survival responses. They're adaptations of energy developed to cope with perceived threats or inconsistency.
So the pathway is a 6-level map for psychological maturation, and critically, these are levels of awareness we move between. They aren't fixed steps.
No, we cycle through them, often daily, depending on the stress load.
Okay, let's trace these levels, because understanding them really helps us track Ray and Molly's slow transformation.
Good idea.
So the first level is survival. Behavior here is driven purely by the primal need for protection. Life is organized around avoiding pain and staying safe.
For Ray, this is the deep-seated fear that if she needs someone, they will disappear. For Molly, it's the panic that if she lands in reality, she'll collapse under the weight of her grief. Both characters start here, even though their expressions look so different.
Then level 2 is stability seeking.
This is where the strategies become codified. We create systems, routines, control, fantasy, emotional distance to manage that overwhelming internal experience. We're seeking safety through external predictability or just absolute avoidance.
And this is where Molly and Ray are entrenched when the film begins, each one relying on their specific mechanism control versus fantasy to keep the unbearable feelings at bay.
Exactly.
Level 3 is self-awareness, and this is the vital tipping point where the transformation begins.
Yeah, this is huge.
We start to notice the pattern instead of being entirely run by it. The defense mechanisms are still there, but a crucial insight emerges. This defense is an adaptation. It's not who I fundamentally am.
The choice to observe, rather than just react, is the first step towards sovereignty.
Then there's level 4, integrity.
This is the emergence of truth. We start knowing and acting in accordance with our true values, even when that involves significant vulnerability or discomfort. For Molly, this means choosing to grieve rather than avoid. For Ray, it means choosing closeness even though her entire history tells her proximity is dangerous.
Okay, then level 5 is wholeness.
This is the capacity to hold true paradox. It's the ability to experience conflicting emotions at the same time, like intense love and immense loss, or proximity and fear, without collapsing back into those rigid survival strategies.
You tolerate complexity where you once demanded simplicity.
Yes. And finally, level 6 is freedom. Choice actively replaces the automatic reaction, and the analysis by Helen Mudeba makes it so clear that survivor strategies don't vanish, but they loosen because they are no longer the only option.
The goal isn't transcendence, it's expanded capacity.
Exactly. We watch Molly and Ray moving, sometimes so painfully, through these very levels.
Okay, so let's now move into part 2. Ray Schlein, the armor of control, and really examine how her stability-seeking fortress functions.
Let's do it.
Ray's entire existence at age 8 is a reaction to the massive unpredictability caused by her parents' simultaneous physical and emotional withdrawal. The analysis highlights that her solution was radical order.
We see this so clearly in the film. She eats the same food daily, she meticulously organizes her room, and she follows her rules, with this kind of militaristic intensity.
The source material identifies this specific defense as dismissive avoidance expressed somatically. We need to unpack that term for a moment because it's so critical.
It is. Most people think of dismissive avoidance as purely relational. You avoid people. But Ray's system is controlling her environment rather than people.
So what does somatically mean in this context? What does that actually look like?
It means she's managing her internal distress through external physical control. Her nervous system, which is overwhelmed by the chaos of emotional loss and unreliable adults, seeks relief by ensuring that the physical space is perfectly predictable.
So if the toys are aligned, if the clothes are folded by size, if the routine is followed,
then the internal chaos is momentarily contained. Safety is established not through warm connection, but through cold, rigid environmental predictability. This is level 2 stability seeking in its purest form.
that makes perfect sense. The environment becomes the safety blanket. But the most visible aspect of this defense is Ray's outward coldness and her cutting anger.
Absolutely. And the analysis argues so powerfully that this anger is not a personality trait. It is her essential emotional bandage.
Why? Why is it a bandage?
Because if Ray drops the anger, she has to drop the distance. And if she drops the distance, she will immediately feel the unbearable longing, the missing, for her functional father and her available mother.
For an 8-year-old, the sheer emotional weight of that reality, the realization that the people she needs are gone or unavailable, is just too catastrophic.
The survival system concludes, missing feels like dying. The anger, the coldness, and the control keep that longing locked down, creating this emotional permafrost that feels safer than warmth.
Let's talk about how this exact pattern, this dismissive avoidance strategy rooted in Ray's childhood, shows up when it remains unconscious in adult life. The analysis provides some very powerful parallels that I think you'll immediately recognize.
Yes. Think about the professional world. The analysis cites the example of the colleague who operates with cold precision. When you offer a gentle suggestion for a revision on something, they don't engage warmly. They often go silent, then return with a terse, detached email or a list, meticulously detailing why your suggestion is fundamentally flawed or impossible.
And that cold precision reads instantly as arrogance or disdain, right? That's how we interpret it.
Exactly. But Mudeba's analysis posits that we are completely misunderstanding the signal, that cold precision is not arrogance. It is instantaneous historical protection. They unconsciously interpreted the suggestion as a rejection of their competency or as an intrusion into their controlled environment. Their fortress rises immediately to protect the vulnerable 8-year-old self inside who fears being found incompetent or unreliable.
So the response isn't targeted at the suggestion itself, it's targeted at the threat of potential rejection or inadequacy.
Precisely. Or consider the friend who makes enthusiastic plans with you, a dinner party, a weekend trip, but cancels 2 hours before, citing overwhelming stress or an urgent need to be alone. Then they just go silent, unresponsive to follow-up texts.
We label that as flaky, unreliable, maybe even passive-aggressive.
And again, we miss the core survival strategy. The analysis suggests they are terrified of being needed, or worse, terrified of being relied upon and then failing to meet the demand, which would recreate that childhood scenario of disappointment and abandonment.
So proximity and future planning trigger the historical risk.
Exactly. They choose isolation control to preemptively manage that risk.
This reframing is so profound because it just flips the entire narrative. We habitually interpret these behaviors, the coldness, the distance, as they do not care about me or they are actively rejecting me.
But we are witnessing pure historical protection. The fortress was built for a reason. They learned early on that closeness was dangerous. The challenge for us is recognizing that their distance is not a statement about your worth, but a statement about their past injury.
Let's shift gears now and look at part 3. Molly gunned the flight into fantasy. Her parallel defense mechanism, which looks so chaotic, serves the exact same purpose: protection.
Right, it's the other side of the same coin.
Molly, the analysis confirms, is emotionally stuck at 8 years old due to the sudden, catastrophic nature of her loss. She just could not handle the raw reality of absence.
So her response, instead of raised contraction, is one of expansive deflection. She builds a life of surface-level charm and high-level whimsy, financed by inherited wealth, maintaining this vibrant fantasy that prevents her from ever having to land in grounded reality or face responsibility.
The moment something requires grounding a job, paying rent, confronting her bank account, she deflects or collapses.
We see this most clearly in her romantic life, particularly her pursuit of the musician. She chases him with this intensity, but he's consistently emotionally distant, and she interprets his coldness as depth and mystery.
This is critical. The analysis emphasizes that Molly is not displaying anxious attachment. She does not seek reassurance or fear abandonment in the typical sense.
Okay, wait, I want to pause on that because that's a huge distinction. I think 99% of people watching that film would immediately label her anxious. So what's the concrete difference? And why does Mudeba insist on this distinction of loss-based activation?
That's an excellent point, and the distinction is everything. Anxiously attached individuals seek reassurance and proximity because they fear the abandonment of the present relationship. Molly's desire, however, is specifically activated by unavailability. She pursues people who are emotionally unreachable because that keeps her grief at a predictable, safe distance. The analysis asserts her deep longing is for the familiar, painful shape of loss, not for genuine connection that requires intimacy and real presence.
So she is chasing the feeling of unreachability, not the person.
Exactly. If she achieves a real, grounded connection, if someone is fully available, that relationship demands emotional reality, responsibility, and most importantly, it demands she lower her defenses and potentially process the massive, sudden loss she has avoided for decades. Unavailability is her comfort zone.
So the musician becomes the symbolic, contained loss she can manage.
Exactly. She cannot face the historical, catastrophic grief of her parents' death, which is too vast. But she can reorient that energy toward a symbolic external target. He becomes a stand-in for her parents, someone she desperately wants but cannot fully reach. By perpetually orienting toward the symbolic, unachievable loss, she avoids facing the original, paralyzing one.
And this fantasy-based avoidance, this longing without ever landing, it shows up everywhere in adult life. The analysis points to the person who becomes intensely passionate about a stranger they met once, spinning these elaborate internal fantasies about their perfect future. The attraction is overwhelming.
Until that person texts back consistently or expresses genuine, stable interest.
And then the attraction just evaporates. The chase ends the moment reality starts knocking.
Because intimacy threatens to become real, and landing in reality requires facing the stored, immense grief and responsibility she's avoided, the fantasy world collapses.
Or think of the person who throws themselves into elaborate, obsessive planning, a huge startup, a complex travel itinerary. But the plans always dissolve at the last minute because of some unexpected crisis or overwhelming panic. They are avoiding the grounded reality where they might have to process life as it actually is, messy and unpredictable.
But here is the major pivot point in the film, the moment of early transformation. Molly, the queen of avoidance, stays with Ray. She doesn't leave when Ray is hostile, cold, or dismissive. She persists through the child's anger. Why?
The analysis argues that Ray's armor, her meticulously controlled grief and her defended distance, is a contained external mirror of Molly's own unprocessed loss. The controlled nature of Ray's pain makes it approachable for Molly for the first time.
So she can witness her own grief in Ray safely, without having to feel the full, overwhelming magnitude internally.
Exactly. And this persistence, this willingness to stay present in the face of friction, signals Molly's first halting step toward self-awareness, level 3 on the pathway. She is choosing observation and relationship over automatic flight because the relationship is triggering her deepest, most hidden wound.
That witnessing is the essence of their mutual healing, setting the stage for part 4, the collision and the cracks, where their carefully constructed defenses begin to crumble.
This is where it gets really interesting.
When Molly first arrives, the collision is immediate and just deeply destabilizing. Molly's chaos against Ray's contraction. Each of their stability-seeking strategies, deflection and control, is put under immense pressure.
Proximity forces both of them to feel what they have successfully avoided for years. The resistance is intense. Ray attacks with cutting anger. Molly responds with increasingly desperate deflection and charm.
Molly's chaos threatens Ray's need for order. Ray's insistence on reality threatens Molly's denial. They interpret the discomfort as incompatibility, right? As two people who just cannot coexist.
But the analysis suggests that discomfort is actually profound recognition. It's the friction created when two fortresses built on the same foundation of pain are forced into proximity.
And this friction leads to the crucial revelation, the pivotal moment in the bedroom, which the script centers on. Molly is trying to connect, trying to engage with Ray's feelings, and Ray finally delivers the strategy spoken aloud. When you are mad, you do not miss people.
So powerful. It names the survival mechanism. Anger creates an instant, impenetrable buffer between Ray and the unbearable feeling of longing for her unavailable parents.
And the brilliance of the scene is in Molly's response. She doesn't intellectualize, she doesn't argue, she doesn't try to fix Ray's feeling or explain why it's wrong to be angry.
No, instead, Molly offers mutual witnessing by sharing her own loss. She describes going to bed confused as a child and waking up to absence. The traumatic loss has been named, and it has been seen, validated, and held by another person who understands that specific kind of sudden void.
What's so fascinating is how the analysis shows the collapse of their systems happening at different times, demonstrating their different pathways toward transformation.
Yes, exactly. So when the musician offers Molly that flicker of real availability, a commitment to genuine relationship, Molly's entire system short-circuits. It can't tolerate the threat of landing in intimacy and responsibility.
So she instantly collapses into chaotic avoidance. She misses commitments, she retreats into irresponsibility, seeking comfort in her old fantasy-based strategy. Her loss-based avoidance is fully exposed.
Yeah, showing she is still operating largely in survival when faced with real connection.
And that's the moment of maximum chaos. We expect Ray, who's allergic to chaos, to retreat entirely back into her fortress of control, to kick Molly out and reorganize the room.
But she doesn't. And this is where Ray demonstrates her shift. She tolerates the disruption of Molly disappearing and returning in chaos without reverting fully to her old, rigid, stability-seeking defenses. She waits. She doesn't fully shut down. She maintains a degree of presence and capacity despite the ground shifting unpredictably beneath her feet.
That slight expansion of tolerance, not collapsing into total rigidity, is the sign that Ray is moving into integrity level 4.
Yes, she is choosing her evolving self and her commitment to the process over the absolute necessity of her old defensive rules. It is the emergence of choice. She is still 8 years old and terrified inside, but the adult part of her system prioritizes the value of their fragile connection over the comfort of her total control. That is the definition of integrity, acting in accordance with your new values, even when it feels intensely uncomfortable.
And that leads us beautifully into part 5, integrity, wholeness, and mutual healing, where the transformation really solidifies, focusing on the slow, messy work that's required. We see the physical, the behavioral evidence of Ray's softening. The analysis details the subtle shifts. She allows small disruptions. She tolerates mess. She accepts imperfection. She's not suddenly chaotic, but the absolute militaristic necessity of order has faded.
Her system is proving to her, through repeated small exposures, that she can survive without absolute environmental control. Her body is learning a new story. Proximity and messiness do not automatically equal catastrophic threat. That is her journey toward freedom from the need for total control.
And this journey culminates, of course, back in the bedroom, the physical space that had been her fortress. Molly, overwhelmed and physically exhausted, finally operates in full integrity.
She names her raw inner experience without the armor of charm or deflection. She clarifies that she wasn't mad the night her parents died. She was profoundly confused and lost. She speaks the truth as she has avoided her entire adult life.
It's a moment of profound vulnerability. And Ray, in turn, achieves her major breakthrough into wholeness. The analysis encourages us to really zoom in on this moment. Ray, who does not speak the language of comfort, who has built her entire life around emotional distance, hesitates.
Her face registers uncertainty and confusion. Comfort is not a practiced skill. Closeness is not a language her body understands.
That hesitation is the sound of the 8-year-old survival system fighting the new choice?
It is. But slowly, haltingly, she moves toward Molly. And the analysis stresses that this is not an act of emotional fluency. This is dismissive, avoidant energy expanding its capacity under extreme duress.
Ray offers comfort, placing her arms around Molly. She allows proximity. She tolerates vulnerability.
And in a gesture that carries the weight of a neurological shift, Ray allows Molly to sleep in her meticulously protected bed.
Proximity replaces distance. Safety is found not in controlled order, but in present connection. This is the definition of wholeness, tolerating the complexity of both the past pain and the present risk, without collapsing back into the simple, rigid defense.
And if we expand this to the higher level reframe provided by the analysis, it was never about us. We started the conversation by noting that at the early survival level, we take everything personally.
Right. Ray's coldness equals rejection of Molly. Molly's chaos means she doesn't respect Ray.
And we internalize that, right?
Yeah.
Molly thinks she hates me. Ray thinks Molly is proof the world is unreliable.
Exactly. But as awareness expands, as we move towards sovereignty, we realize distance, anger, and coldness are rarely about the person in front of us.
Ray's dismissal was never about Molly. It was about protecting the deeply frightened, vulnerable 8-year-old she was keeping locked away. Molly's emotional openness simply touched what Ray had exiled in herself.
This brings us to the profound mirroring insight, which is so core to Mudeba's work. What repels us in others is often what they have exiled in themselves.
The cold person is protecting tenderness. The dismissive person is dismissing their own need. The chaotic person is avoiding their own stillness.
So the thesis, then, isn't that Ray and Molly save each other, but that they mirror the exiled parts each has been unable to hold alone.
Yes, healing happens through recognition, through witnessing the pain, rather than through fixing the other person. The willingness to stay present in the presence of friction is the key.
Yeah.
And the result is mutual expansion. Ray learns wholeness, tolerating complexity and vulnerability. Molly moves toward freedom, choosing to grieve instead of run, choosing presence over her automatic reaction of avoidance. The strategies are loosened. Choice has replaced reaction.
So what does this all mean for us? We've watched the film as a roadmap for our own attachment patterns. Now the analysis invites us to turn that same gentle, non-judgmental attention inward. The question Ray asks, where do you stay mad to avoid missing, belongs to every one of us. Where does anger act as a protection against vulnerability, grief, or longing? Which fortress walls are you still maintaining that once kept you safe, but now keep you locked away from connection?
And the analysis emphasizes a critical practice on the pathway to sovereignty. The practice of naming the strategy without shame. Ray's anger, Molly's avoidance. We have to remember these were intelligent, necessary responses to overwhelming pain. They are adaptations, not moral failures.
But the limitation only happens when these strategies remain completely unconscious and run the show.
Right. When we name the strategy, when we can pause and say, I am activating fantasy right now because I am terrified of landing in grief, or I am choosing distance because the warmth being offered is triggering my historical fear of abandonment, we create essential space. We realize we are the person underneath the strategy, the one who is trying desperately to be safe.
So if we look at practical steps for expanding capacity, the analysis suggests starting with radical self-awareness focused on the body. We have to notice the somatic activation. When someone offers warmth and your instinct is to become cold or distant, what happens physically?
Do you feel a tight chest, a shallow breath? That is the old 8-year-old survival strategy activating. Before you speak that cold, dismissive line, pause and ask, what am I protecting when this urge toward anger or distance arises? Is the threat real or is it historical?
And then comes the step of choice, of micro moments of integrity. The analysis encourages us to choose connection even when distance feels safer.
Yes. The next time someone offers warmth and every fiber in your being screams flee or attack, try staying present for just 30 seconds longer than feels comfortable. 30 seconds of holding the complexity of fear and desire can feel like an eternity on a tightrope.
But that is the work of wholeness.
It is. Notice what softens when you do not immediately flee or collapse. That small expansion of capacity is profoundly significant. As Helen Madiba reflects in the analysis, freedom is not found in transcending our humanity, but in expanding our capacity to hold it. The fear, the anger, the longing, and the immense vulnerability of sudden love or sudden loss.
Remember Ray, the 8-year-old, choosing to move toward Molly and offer comfort instead of maintaining her fortress of distance.
That single choice prioritizing connection over protection is the precise moment sovereignty begins.
That moment of choice is everything, and it only happens when we pause the automatic reaction. If this deep dive has activated some curiosity about your own protective patterns and how they might relate to the sovereignty framework, the resources from Helen Mudeba are designed for deeper integration. Specifically, the guided meditation, Where Am I on the Pathway to Sovereignty, offers a somatic way to explore where you are meeting life right now, from protection or presence. by bringing a challenging relationship into gentle internal focus.
That's a really powerful practice.
And for anyone currently sitting with the pain of a difficult ending, the journal Your Path Forward After a Difficult Ending offers a 21-day journey into meeting grief, clarity, and release without the armor you might habitually turn to. You can find links to both of these resources in the description.
Great.
Thank you for diving deep with us today.